Nick. How are you doing today?
I am outstanding, Amy. How are you doing?
I am terrific, and it is past Lent, so it is time for cocktails and current events with actual cocktails. What are you drinking today?
I have a margarita going. I'm sticking with the classics.
Nice, and so that is with ice, not the kind that you make in a blender.
Correct. Yes, I do the shaker thing.
Oh, yeah, I like the frozen kind.
Sorry.
No, that is a good deal. So we are talking today. If you have not joined the show, we are on episode 8, and what we do is have some drinks and talk about what's going on in the world, and we do discuss it from a U.S. perspective. Nick is an expert historian and expert on current events from all of the wonderful things that he has done, and we're going to dive right into. We had some episodes before where we were talking about what was going on in Europe, and now for those of you not tracking, Europe is talking about setting up an alternative alliance to NATO. And Nick, what are the impacts of that?
Yeah, so NATO, contrary to what some people in the administration want to believe, NATO is still an incredibly useful organization for the United States. Just for example, just flowing all the forces into the Middle East that were able to do the operations against Iran, that all went through our logistical hubs in Europe. And we only have those because of NATO. Our missile defense ships that were helping to protect Israel, they didn't come back to the United States to reload. They went back to ports that we have agreements with because of NATO in Europe. So NATO is absolutely vital to world security and U.S. national security from my perspective, not just because of the mutual defense, but because of what it enables us to do in Europe. Yeah, projecting and then to project power and influence into Africa, the Middle East, and into Asia. The notion here is Trump's madman theory and madman approach to global politics has certainly pushed a lot of our friends and allies away. And then when you get into some of the things like expending a whole lot of munitions in Iran, and then the follow-on is that we're not going to be able to fulfill some of our foreign military sales contracts on time. We're going to have to delay some of the deliveries to allies in Europe in particular, but not just Europe, around the globe, so that we can reload some of our munitions. These nations look at this and say, hey, is the United States a reliable ally? Can we count on them? And when Trump says, maybe I won't come to your defense, they have to say, hey, we've got to find a way to defend ourselves. And if that means that we have to establish our own defense industrial base and not buy American, but buy European, and develop our own military formations that aren't reliant upon U.S. Training or U.S. partnerships to be created like an EU. It's probably more of an EU military, and there have been undertones and discussions about that for a very, very long time. But they're really starting to get the ball rolling with a nascent. Let's create a pan-European movement to do this, not just reliant upon a big superpower across the ocean.
Yeah, and I think that we saw a lot of fallout from that recently in the Hungarian election. So, do you want to talk about the results of that election and the fact that we had a sitting vice president, J.D. Vance, go out there and actively campaign, as well as getting Trump on a telephone call?
Yeah, and we talked about this last week too. So it would be inaccurate to say that the election hinged upon the relationship with the United States. There are a lot of domestic Hungarian issues that really drove that election. But the impacts of that election are absolutely going to be felt outside of the borders of Hungary. And like you mentioned, the Trump administration invested a lot into trying to keep Orbán in power. I will say the Putin administration invested a lot to try to keep Orbán in power as well. He lost. So both the Trump administration, from a ideological standpoint, they saw his model of governance as the template for how to model a U.S. government to try to get rid of the liberalism in small L liberalism in Western society and try to create a more nationalistic Christian nationalism specifically approach to governance. And then, of course, from Russia's standpoint, that was their reach directly to influence NATO and the European Union. He heard everything that was discussed. It went directly from those meetings through Orbán to Putin, and so losing that channel is going to be a huge blow. But that said, that's not the only channel he has. The neighboring is it Slovak? I want to say it's the Slovak Prime Minister, Fico, something. His name escapes me. Is also very pro Putin. So it's not his only horse in the fight.
Definitely not. And last week when we discussed it, the elections were still not decided. So now we've had the elections, we've seen Hungary, and I think a really significant part of this is Hungary has definitely shown like, hey, we want to realign back in with EU, back into Europe, and kind of go into that fold. It will certainly be interesting to see what Slovakia does, as Hungary has already moved in that direction of, having a mandate saying we would like to be better aligned with the EU and our European counterparts.
Well, and the EU leadership was very openly celebrating the results of the election. So from an EU perspective and from a pan-European perspective, they were very happy with the way that turned out. But I don't want to stress this too much that it was foreign policy. I want to reiterate that there were a lot of domestic economic and corruption issues inside Hungary that really drove that election. And I will say, foreshadowing some future discussion, there are some similarities with what's going on domestically here in the United States as well.
Yeah, so lots of good points there, and definitely going to be watching this kind of EU alliance as it evolves. Ukraine has made a major play into, with Zelensky about what this kind of new EU alliance would look like as well. So that would be a significant shift, whereas Ukraine has not been allowed into NATO as that kind of buffer country.
Yeah. Yeah, and I want to take a quick moment and say it's not just Europe that's experiencing this. So you've seen the parade of European leaders visiting China to try to hedge against the United States and our rather chaotic approach to global economics. They're not the only ones. There was an article, I want to say in Politico this past week, about how diplomatic cables are going out from several U.S. embassies saying that from an information standpoint, we're getting our butts kicked. That the Chinese are being able to drum up the support that they are the adult in the room, that they are the stable player, and that you can't rely on the United States. So we're going to try to say don't partner with the United States, partner with China, because we can offer stability, even if that comes with extra baggage of they're dumping their economic products on you, and that's a winning message in some parts of the world right now.
And China, like you said, big wins for Russia. China wins also includes the flex they did recently with carriers into the strait, as well as being able to set some pricing, not with the U.S. dollar, but using Chinese currency, which is significant. You want to talk about that a bit?
Oh, my goodness. Yeah. So the petrodollar, discussing the petrodollar is a very, very long and very technical discussion. But short version is that since at least the 70s, gas has been valued and traded in U.S. dollars, and it has been incredibly beneficial to us. Now, over time, that the valuation, it's called the petrodollar, has diminished. It's still more than 50%, but it's waning. And while that wanes, that is going to take away from our ability to influence global policy through economics. And that means that the other countries who start trading in the yuan or the ruble or the rupee are going to be able to gain in power through the use of their currencies, buying not just oil, but as a more of a stable currency for global economic trade.
Such a good point. And for those of you out there, once again, this is Cocktails and Current Events. Please please subscribe, and please tell us what you're interested in hearing about. Pretty much Nick and I peruse different things, and then we develop some stories out of it. You can follow me on my blog, and I'm also in the process of developing a Substack, because blogs are now passe and people go to Substack. So working on that. I am going to be putting out an article that I did a lot of research on later today, and Nick and I kind of want to delve into this just in the last few minutes of this segment, and talking about not just Iran in the sense of we're at this war, but what does it mean in the new global military industrial environment? How have things changed, and how are people profiting off this war like never seen before?
Yeah, so real quick, where we are right now, the large-scale combat operations are still on pause. Israel has a nominal ceasefire with Lebanon. I say nominal because Israel's approach to ceasefires is you cease, we will continue firing, and they have continued but on a smaller scale, bombing in Lebanon. The Iranians initially said that they were going to open the strait up, and then after the United States did not unblockade Iranian ports, they reclosed the straits, including firing on some Indian flagged vessels. But what you were referring to specifically about how the profiteering is going on and how there's Trump has, throughout his at least the second term, tailored announcements, big announcements around market openings and closings. So the big ceasefire was announced specifically right on a Friday morning when the market opened, so that the market would shoot up. The perception is that he did it specifically so the market would shoot up and that oil would drop. And then you saw some really unusual trades, and it's certainly not unique to the Iran situation. There have been, like, all the way back to the Venezuelan situation. There were some really big trades and really big bets in the poly markets right before these big actions took place that definitely suggest that there's some insider trading going on. And I think that's what you're really alluding to, right, Amy?
Well, definitely the poly markets, the kind of timing of the markets, and what we've seen historically. You had the big companies, the Booz Allens, the Kellogg Brown and Roots, etc. Profiteering.
Halliburton, don't forget Halliburton.
I think Kellogg Brown and Root is part of Halliburton now.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Confused about how those work out. But yeah, you make a great point. All the big players, all the big numbers. Of course, the Boeing, General Dynamics, etc. And so we've seen this in a very traditional way happening. Where the military industrial machine has made money. And now I think for the first time, a lot of people are saying you're seeing profiteering at an entirely new scale on the market scale, especially with these poly markets available, and kind of an understanding that the people who are losing their lives is just the average American or just the average Iranian out there who just want to earn a living and make enough that they can pay the utility bills. In the meantime, others are becoming multimillionaires and billionaires off of this.
Yeah, there was right before the announcement was made for the ceasefire, somebody shorted oil to the tune of something like $750 million, and that's not the only case. So right before when he invaded, or not invaded, but when he started the campaign against Iran, he waited until after the markets closed on a Friday. So it was late Friday night or early Saturday morning. And that's a habitual thing. It's like, I know that this my announcement is going to have an effect on the markets. So all my friends make their trades now to set themselves up for big profits. And it's happened repeatedly. One of the big things that frustrates me as an American citizen is I would expect these things to be investigated by the SEC, and they're just not.
I mean, definitely a great point about, where this is, where kind of the suffering and pain points are for the average person, compared with the elite who are really kind of above this. They're not the people who are sending their sons and daughters into these war zones.
Oh my goodness,
who are being impacted.
Yeah. Yeah. When's the last time a Trump was in a military formation? I don't know if there's an answer to that.
Yeah, and I don't know that there's ever been such a thing. So, Nick, this kind of is a bit of a sad note to end on, and just kind of a reminder to everybody. We still have Cuba out there struggling. Cuba has been without power significant portions of their day. They are running out of food. And this scary thing, when you look at really what's going on there with Havana and Cuba, is there's not really been a lot of focus or even demands for what they can do to make this end.
Yeah, they've effectively just put it on the back burner. They've not relented in any way, but they've not worked, at least from what I've seen, they've not worked to address with the Cuban regime about what steps they can do to mitigate this embargo, so that the Cubans can get on with their lives. And I'll say it's not just Cuba too, because the United States has cranked up pressure on Greenland again. They've done it quietly, but we're at least looking at building out 3 more bases, and we're trying to do it in such a way that it violates the existing SOFA and it establishes U.S. complete control over those bases. The Danes are absolutely balking at that, and I think rightly so. But it's that Greenland has not gone away either.
Yeah, and that definitely touches on that point that we had in the very beginning of the segment where we were talking about how when it comes to the European Union, they are no longer considering the U.S. in many cases to be a good actor. This situation with Greenland continues to get hotter and continues to be a very, very contentious issue with people that honestly we didn't need it to be a contentious issue. They would have most likely agreed to working with us had we just decided to work with them civilly in the beginning and not threaten to take over and
I am absolutely convinced that traditional diplomacy could have gotten us what we wanted to and what we wanted in Greenland without all the theatrics.
Yeah, and then just for reminders as well as when you look at Greenland, and there's been a lot of threats of trying to annex them. But when you look at quality of life, Greenland has wonderful healthcare. Greenland has a wonderful education system and a much low. And for those of you who know me on the Book Core universe, my big advocacy is women. Greenland definitely has a much better quality of life and standards, when it comes to fair and equitable treatment of women in their society. Nick, anything you want to add before we wrap it up? We are at the end of the segment already.
Oh my goodness. It's a high adventure remains. I certainly hope that negotiations lead to a peaceful resolution with conflict with Iran, and that we can find some sort of peaceful resolution of conflict with Cuba. But it definitely, I studied international affairs as a graduate student, and it is fascinating, if troubling to live through.
Well, Nick, thank you again for being here. We'll see everybody next week. I love having you here on Cocktails and Current Events, and cheers.
Cheers.